Hi everyone, I've got a short video for you today looking at the skill of questioning within a mentoring and a coaching capacity. So first up, why would we use questions? Well, they're a very natural thing to do in conversation, but they've got quite specific use within mentoring and coaching practices. Firstly, questions are fantastic at opening up new perspectives, different kind of insights on a situation. And secondly, we can use questions in quite a gentle and supportive way to help the people we're working with perhaps challenge some of the unhelpful assumptions that they're making. Within our contexts, more specifically, there are sort of three areas you might think about using these kinds of questions. The first is getting your mentor to evaluate their own teaching practice. We can use questions to kind of scaffold that skill of reflection. Secondly, we can use questions to help them to link theory to their practice. So perhaps thinking about skills, concepts of teaching that they're learning on the MA, and then applying those into the work they're doing with you. Thirdly, we can use questions in a slightly more meta way to not just look at what our participants, our mentees are doing, but helping them to think about why they're doing those things and how successful their strategies of learning are, looking at things perhaps like professionalism, timekeeping, things like this. So how to spot if our question has really landed, thinking about powerful questions. Well, there are sort of two criteria that I would go by. The first is the squirm. People, being a bit uncomfortable and thinking, I sort of really wish you hadn't asked me that. And secondly, the light bulb moment, when we really have sparked this new idea it's kind of connected something. So if that's our aim, one of the things that you might think about is balancing and getting a kind of congenial balance of intensity in the kind of questions you ask. One recommendation for this is that the word why tends to not be very helpful in a one-to-one context, particularly. The reason for this is when we ask someone why, it can come across a bit accusatory when there's already the intensity of being one-to-one and talking about something important. So questions that begin with why often yield some kind of self-defense. People tend to think about, going into the past, justifying, thinking about the things they believe in. So if you want to do one thing to improve your questioning off the bat, try to eliminate the word why. Just see what happens if you frame those kinds of questions in a slightly different way. Conversely, questions that begin with who, when, and where, they just tend to be a little bit closed. And questions like this usually are about us wanting more information. Often, that's not the most helpful thing for the person we're working with at that point. So consider questions that begin with what or how, and see how those work for you. These questions tend to be a little bit more incisive, and they tend to focus on either the present moment or kind of future planning, which can ultimately just be a bit more engaging for the interaction. By way of example, I've got 5 different questions that begin with what and begin with how to share with you, and you can sort of see how these are framed. These won't necessarily always be a powerful question in the moment. Questions are very situationally appropriate, so you're going to have to go through the process of working out what is a better and a worse question. Let's look at some what questions. What do you want to do? What options do you have? What has worked before? What does success look like? And what if you don't do that? Then 5 how questions. How could you achieve that? How will that benefit you? How do you think that will be received? How do you know that? And how important is that? If you want to take it even more simply, there are 2 really useful kind of starter openings to a question, and that's the what if and the how might. Now you can see from this and the ones before, mentoring and coaching questions tend to be very open, and they tend to be very supportive of a variety of different responses. You can see this is where the non-judgmentalism of these kinds of practices is coming out. So finally, just a few suggestions when using questions, when trying to have powerful questioning in our work. Firstly, be curious. Try to genuinely connect with that sense of interest and intrigue in working out how our mentees are thinking and working. Secondly, keep your questions short and ask one question at a time. Don't confuse the matter by adding length and depth. To help with that, you can use numbers to narrow the focus. What are the two most important things about being on this module for you? 4, chase the squirm, chase the light bulb. See if you can work out what's going to be a more powerful question. All being based off your skills of listening and being able to really try and understand and work with the person in front of you. That's it for this little video. All the best. Take care.